On April 9, 2024, at 4:17 a.m. Universal Time Coordinated, astronaut Trevor Hayes, 41 years old, was conducting a routine pressure seal verification aboard Meridian 7, an experimental orbital research station positioned at 256 miles above Earth's surface in low Earth orbit. Trevor had been alone on the station for 18 days, halfway through a planned 36-day solo mission studying the long-term psychological and physiological effects of extended isolation in microgravity. He had accumulated 2,347 hours in space across 4 previous missions, served 12 years with NASA, and before that, spent 7 years as a test pilot for the United States Air Force, where he'd logged time in experimental aircraft that officially didn't exist. His graduate degree in acoustic engineering from MIT made him uniquely qualified to understand what he heard next. And what he understood was that it was impossible. 3 metallic knocks. Clear, deliberate, resonant. Coming from the external hatch of the habitation module. Trevor froze mid-motion, digital pressure gauge still in his hand. The reading showing normal cabin pressure at 14.7 pounds per square inch. He held his breath. Silence. The usual hum of life support systems, the quiet whir of cooling fans, the distant tick of thermal expansion in the station's aluminum frame as it cycled between sunlight and shadow every 93 minutes. Then it happened again. 3 knocks, distinct impacts against metal, spaced approximately 1.5 seconds apart. He checked his watch. 7 seconds passed. 3 more knocks. Same rhythm, same location, same impossible phenomenon. Trevor's training kicked in immediately. He moved to the nearest console and activated the external sensor array, pulling up radar tracking data for all known objects within a 50-kilometer radius of Meridian 7's current position. The screen displayed nothing. No debris, no satellites, no spacecraft. Mission Control in Houston maintained constant tracking of over 27,000 pieces of space debris larger than a softball. Anything on an intercept course would have triggered proximity alarms at least 4 hours in advance. The station's accelerometers, sensitive enough to detect vibrations from a dropped pen, showed 0 impact signatures. Hull integrity sensors reported no stress, no collision, no contact of any kind. But Trevor had heard it. He pulled up the internal audio monitoring system designed to record all sounds within the habitation module for psychological study analysis. The waveform was there. 3 distinct peaks. Pause. 3 more peaks. The audio spectrum analysis showed frequency bands between 400 and 2,000 hertz, consistent with metal-on-metal contact. The problem was simple and absolute. Sound cannot propagate through vacuum. Space is silent. Not quiet. Silent. There is no air, no medium for pressure waves to travel through. The station's hull was 6 inches of aluminum alloy and reinforced Kevlar. On the other side of that hull was nothing. Literally nothing. Temperature of minus 270 degrees Fahrenheit. Pressure of 0. Void. And in that void, nothing could knock. Trevor activated the communication system. Houston, Meridian 7. I'm showing some unusual audio anomalies. Request telemetry review. His voice was calm, measured. That was the training. Emotion was data contamination. Facts first. Garrett's voice came back 8 seconds later, the time it took for radio waves to travel from orbit to Earth and back at the speed of light. Copy, Meridian 7. Can you describe the anomaly? Trevor chose his words carefully. Intermittent acoustic events. Source appears external to habitation module. Pattern is regular. 3 events. Pause of approximately 7 seconds. Repeat. I'm not showing any corresponding sensor data. No radar contacts. No vibration signatures. No pressure changes. There was a longer pause this time. 14 seconds. Understood, Meridian 7. Stand by while we review telemetry. Trevor waited. The station rotated slowly through its orbital path at 17,500 miles per hour, crossing from night side to day side of Earth. Through the small observation window, he watched the Terminator line sweep across Africa, the thin blue atmosphere catching fire with scattered sunlight. He'd seen this view dozens of times. It had always been beautiful. Right now it looked impossibly fragile. 43 minutes later, exactly 1/3 of an orbital period, the knocking returned. 3 impacts. Pause. 3 impacts. The same location. The same impossible sound. Trevor documented the timestamp, 4:59 a.m. UTC. He pulled up an orbital mechanics calculator and ran the numbers. If this repeated again at the same interval, it would occur at 5:42 a.m. UTC, precisely when Meridian 7 completed another third of its orbit. The pattern wasn't random. It was tied to their position in space. Something was waiting for them. Something was marking time. Something knew where they were. The knocking came again at 5:42 a.m. UTC, exactly as Trevor had calculated. He was ready this time, floating in front of the external sensor array, with a digital audio recorder positioned near the hull wall, where the sound appeared strongest. 3 knocks, 7-second pause. 3 knocks. He captured it on 4 different recording devices simultaneously, each with different sensitivity ranges and frequency response curves. The waveforms matched perfectly across all devices. This wasn't electromagnetic interference. It wasn't audio hallucination. It wasn't psychosis from isolation. It was real sound, physically vibrating the air inside a sealed chamber, originating from a source that should not exist. Trevor began a systematic documentation protocol, the kind of meticulous data collection that separated trained astronauts from panicked civilians. He measured ambient temperature at the hull surface, minus 157 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly within normal range for the shadow side of orbit. He checked structural stress sensors, 0 abnormal readings. He reviewed high-resolution external camera feeds, no objects, no impacts, no visual anomalies. He ran a complete diagnostic on the audio monitoring system, functioning perfectly. No hardware faults, no software glitches. At 6:25 a.m. UTC, the pattern repeated for the 4th time. Trevor transmitted all collected data to Houston with a detailed technical summary. Garrett's response came back with a different voice in the background, someone conferring quickly before Garrett spoke. Meridian 7, Houston. We're seeing your audio data. Initial assessment suggests possible microdebris impacts below radar threshold, or, alternatively, thermal expansion effects in the hull plating. Recommend continued monitoring and documentation. Trevor kept his voice neutral. Houston, thermal expansion is ruled out. External temperature has been stable for the past 3 hours, variance less than 2 degrees. Microdebris would show impact signatures on accelerometers. I'm showing 0 vibration events. The audio is clear and consistent, but there's no physical evidence of contact. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a new voice came through, female, professional, carrying the kind of authority that came from decades of experience. Meridian 7. This is Monica Chen, Flight Systems Engineering. I'm reviewing your complete telemetry package now. Stand by. Trevor recognized the name. Monica Chen had been with NASA for 15 years, one of the lead engineers who designed Meridian 7's environmental control systems. If anyone could find a technical explanation, it would be her. He waited, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath him, the Terminator line now crossing the Indian Ocean. Monica's voice returned after 8 minutes. "Trevor, I've analyzed hull stress data, pressure sensors, thermal gradients, orbital mechanics, and your audio spectrum analysis. I'm not finding anything that explains this. Your microphone placement is capturing genuine acoustic vibrations. Frequency analysis shows metal-on-metal contact characteristics, but I have zero physical evidence of any impact or contact event. No debris on tracking, no pressure variations, no structural anomalies. This doesn't make sense." It was the first time Trevor had heard uncertainty in Mission Control's voice. He appreciated the honesty. "Monica, there's something else you should know. The timing pattern. The knocking occurs every 43 minutes. That's exactly 1/3 of our orbital period. It's synchronized to our position." There was a very long silence. When Monica spoke again, her tone had shifted. Professional distance replaced by something closer to concern. "Trevor, I need you to think carefully about this. Have you experienced any other unusual phenomena? Visual disturbances? Vestibular disorientation? Memory gaps? Any changes in cognitive function?" He understood what she was really asking. Was he losing his mind? He'd been alone for 18 days. Isolation psychosis was a documented risk. But he also knew what he was hearing was real. "Negative, Monica. Cognitive function is normal. I ran a full self-assessment protocol this morning. Memory recall is sharp. No visual anomalies. No disorientation. I'm documenting audio events that match across multiple independent recording systems. This isn't psychological." Another pause. Then Monica said something that changed everything. "Trevor, the pattern you described, 3 impacts, 7-second interval. Does that mean anything to you specifically? Any personal significance?" Trevor's chest tightened. He hadn't mentioned that detail to anyone. The 3-7 pattern was something he and Lucas Morrison had developed 4 years ago during survival training in Alaska. It was a private emergency signal, a way to communicate, "I'm in trouble but can't speak freely," if they were ever in a compromised situation. They'd used it as a joke afterward, a coded knock on each other's quarters before missions. Nobody else knew about it. Lucas had been the previous solo occupant of Meridian 7 6 months ago. His mission had been cut short at 22 days, evacuated early for what NASA called undisclosed medical reasons. Trevor had tried to contact Lucas afterward, but was told he was in medical isolation, unavailable for communication. He'd found that strange. Lucas had been in perfect health, probably the fittest astronaut in the program. "Monica, how do you know about the 3-7 pattern?" Trevor asked quietly. The silence that followed lasted 18 seconds. When Monica finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because Lucas reported the exact same thing. Same pattern. Same interval. Same impossible sound. 3 days before we brought him home." Trevor felt the temperature drop in the cabin, though he knew that was impossible too. The environmental controls maintained a constant 72 degrees Fahrenheit. But learning that Lucas had experienced the same phenomenon, the same pattern, the same impossible knocking, sent something cold through his core that had nothing to do with physics. "Monica, I need to see Lucas's reports. All of them." He could hear her breathing on the other end of the transmission, the 8-second delay making the silence feel even heavier. "Trevor, those reports are sealed. Medical confidentiality. I shouldn't have even told you this much." "Tunt, but there was something in her voice, a hesitation that suggested she wanted him to push. "Monica, if this is a recurring phenomenon on Meridian 7, if it's happened to multiple crew members, that's not medical confidentiality. That's operational safety. I have a right to know what I'm dealing with up here." Another long pause. Then he heard a different sound in the background, what might have been Garrett's voice saying something sharp, urgent. Monica's response was muffled, like she'd covered her microphone. When she came back, her words were measured, careful. "Trevor, stand by. Flight director wants to conference." But before the connection could switch over, Trevor heard something he wasn't supposed to hear. Garrett's voice, distant but clear enough, apparently not realizing the channel was still open. "We can't tell him about Wright-Patterson. If he knows Lucas is in psychiatric isolation at the same facility that ran Blue Book investigations, he'll refuse the rest of the mission. We need him up there for 12 more days of baseline data." Monica's response was quieter, but Trevor caught it. "Garrett, he's experiencing the same phenomena. The pattern is identical. If we don't tell him what we know, and something happens..." The channel cut abruptly. When it reopened, it was Garrett's voice, official and controlled. "Meridian 7, Houston Flight Director. Disregard previous conversation. Communications error. We're going to have you continue nominal operations while we analyze the audio data. Maintain current schedule." Trevor didn't respond immediately. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. The same installation that had housed Project Blue Book from 1952 to 1969. The Air Force's official investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena. And Lucas was there. Not in a NASA medical facility, not in a civilian hospital. In psychiatric isolation at a military base with a history of classified research into things that officially didn't exist. Trevor made his decision. "Houston, I'm preparing for an unscheduled EVA. I need to visually inspect the external hull at the location of the acoustic events." Garrett's response was immediate. "Negative, Meridian 7. EVA is not authorized. There is no indication of hull compromise. You are to remain inside the station." But Trevor was already moving toward the airlock, pulling his EVA suit from its storage locker. "Garrett, as mission commander of this station, I have authority to conduct EVAs for safety verification. I'm observing unexplained phenomena that may indicate structural issues. I'm going outside." He could hear the frustration in Garrett's voice. "Trevor, do not proceed with EVA. That is a direct order from Flight Director." "Buns," Trevor stopped for a moment, floating in the narrow corridor with his suit half deployed. "Garrett, are you telling me there's something out there I should be afraid of? Because if this is just thermal expansion or microdebris like you said, then an EVA is standard protocol. But if you're ordering me to stay inside, that means you think there's an actual threat. Which is it?" The silence lasted 23 seconds. When Garrett came back, his voice was different, resigned. "Proceed with EVA, but maintain constant communication. Any anomalies, you terminate immediately and return to airlock. Understood?" Trevor was already sealing his suit. "Understood." The EVA preparation took 47 minutes. Check suit integrity. Verify oxygen supply. 6 hours reserve. Test communication systems. Depressurize airlock. The familiar routine was comforting, mechanical, something his hands knew how to do while his mind processed what he'd learned. Lucas had heard the knocking. Lucas had been taken to Wright-Patterson. Lucas was in psychiatric isolation. The knocking was still happening. Trevor opened the external hatch and pushed himself out into the void. The transition from the warm, humming interior of the station to the absolute silence of space was always jarring, no matter how many times he'd done it. No sound, no air. Just the distant sun, brilliant and cold, and the vast curve of Earth below. Blues and whites and browns rotating slowly beneath him. He used handholds to pull himself along the exterior hull toward the habitation module's external hatch, the location where the knocking seemed loudest. His movements were slow, deliberate, each grip tested before releasing the previous one. One mistake, and he'd drift away, tethered only by a 30-meter safety line. He reached the hatch and stopped. For a moment he just looked at it, the metal surface reflecting sunlight in harsh contrast against shadow. Then he saw them. Scratches. Fresh scratches in the reinforced steel alloy hull. 3 parallel lines, each approximately 7 centimeters apart, running vertical along the hatch seal. The metal was scored deep enough to catch his gloved finger. Trevor's breath caught. He'd personally inspected this hatch 48 hours ago as part of routine maintenance. There had been no scratches. The hull plating was aerospace-grade steel, designed to withstand micrometeorite impacts and thermal stress of plus or minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Scratching it would require industrial cutting tools, and more than that, it would require being outside, in vacuum, with equipment that left no debris, no trace, no evidence of presence. Houston, I have visual confirmation of anomalous hull damage. 3 parallel scratches. Vertical orientation, approximately 7 centimeters spacing. Depth appears significant. This wasn't here 2 days ago. Monica's voice came back, and he could hear the tension. Trevor, can you get close-up images? He was already positioning his helmet camera. Affirmative. Transmitting now. As he leaned closer to examine the marks, he noticed something else. The scratches weren't random. They were too precise, too deliberate. The spacing was exact. 7 centimeters. 3 marks. The same pattern as the knocking. 3-7. Their code. Lucas's code. His code. And then, impossible, insane, physically impossible but happening anyway, Trevor heard it again. Through his helmet, through the vacuum of space. 3 knocks. Clear as if someone was rapping knuckles against metal right next to his ear. He spun around, heart hammering, searching for the source. Nothing. Empty space. Earth below. Stars above. The station's solar panels stretching out like wings. No debris. No spacecraft. No objects within visual range. But the sound had been there. Real. Undeniable. And for the first time in 18 days of isolation, for the first time in 12 years as an astronaut, for the first time in his entire carefully controlled, methodically trained, scientifically grounded life, Trevor Hayes felt the cold grip of genuine terror. Because sound cannot travel through vacuum. But something was knocking anyway. And it knew his name. Trevor terminated the EVA and returned to the airlock faster than any protocol recommended, his hands moving on autopilot while his mind tried to process what he'd experienced. Sound in vacuum, scratches that appeared overnight on military-grade hull plating, a pattern that matched a private code only he and Lucas knew. By the time he'd repressurized the airlock and removed his suit, his hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the fundamental rupture in his understanding of reality. He'd spent 12 years in space, 4 degrees in physics and engineering, 7 years as a test pilot pushing experimental aircraft past known limitations. He understood the rules. He trusted the rules. The rules had just broken. He floated to the communications console and spoke with a calm he didn't feel. "Houston, I need complete access to Lucas Morrison's mission reports from Meridian 7. All of them, including the sealed medical files. This is not a request." Garrett's voice came back with bureaucratic resistance. "Trevor, you know I can't authorize that. Medical records are protected. Privacy regulations, even if I wanted to." But Monica cut him off, her voice sharp. "Garrett, he just heard knocking through his helmet in hard vacuum. Either our astronaut is experiencing acute psychosis, which means we need to abort the mission immediately, or something is happening on that station that we don't understand. Either way, he has operational need to know." The argument in Houston continued for several seconds, voices overlapping before the channel muted. Trevor waited, watching the Earth complete another rotation beneath him, the Terminator line crossing Asia now, sunrise painting the atmosphere in thin bands of orange and gold. When the channel reopened, it was Monica's voice, quiet and deliberate. "Trevor, I'm sending you encrypted files now, not through official channels. These are backup data recovered from Lucas's personal storage drive. NASA doesn't know I have them. What you're about to read stays between us." The files arrived 30 seconds later, compressed and password protected. Monica sent the password separately. "Meridian 7 knows." Trevor opened the first file. It was a personal log, video format, dated 6 months ago. Lucas's face appeared on screen, looking exhausted, eyes red from lack of sleep. The timestamp showed day 19 of his mission, almost exactly where Trevor was now. Lucas spoke directly to the camera, his voice low and urgent. "This is unofficial documentation. If you're watching this, Monica sent it to you, which means you're experiencing the same thing I did. The knocking, the pattern, the 3-7 code. I need you to understand something crucial. This isn't external. It's not coming from outside the station. It's coming from between spaces." Trevor paused the video. "Between spaces. What did that mean?" He resumed playback. Lucas continued, choosing his words carefully, like someone trying to explain color to the blind. "On day 14, I started hearing the knocking. Same pattern you're hearing. 3 impacts, 7-second pause, repeat. NASA told me it was thermal expansion, then micro-debris, then psychological stress from isolation. But I'm an astronaut. I know the difference between equipment noise and something else." On day 17, I went EVA to investigate. I found scratches on the hull, exactly where the sound was loudest. Fresh scratches that weren't there before. And when I was outside, I heard it through my helmet. Sound in vacuum. Impossible, but happening. That's when I realized the impossibility is the point. This isn't about physics. It's about perception. About consciousness existing in states we don't have instruments to measure. Lucas leaned closer to the camera, his expression intense. I started researching quantum mechanics, non-local phenomena, the observer effect. There's a theory, not mainstream but mathematically sound, about dimensional boundaries becoming permeable under specific conditions. Extreme isolation, extreme distance from Earth's electromagnetic field, consciousness untethered from normal sensory input. Meridian 7 orbits at the exact altitude where Earth's magnetosphere is weakest. We're in a gap, a thin place. And something on the other side is aware of us. Trevor felt his skin prickle. Lucas wasn't describing alien contact. He was describing something far stranger, something that existed outside the framework of conventional physics. The video continued. On day 20, I made contact. Not visual, not auditory. It was presence, awareness. I was in the observation cupola, watching Earth, and I felt something watching back, not from space, from somewhere adjacent to space. A different layer of reality, and it was curious, not hostile, just aware. I tried to communicate. I used meditation techniques to quiet my thoughts, to make my mind receptive. And that's when I understood the knocking. It's not a sound, it's a resonance, a harmonic frequency that exists below normal hearing range, but that consciousness can perceive directly. Infrasound, but not natural infrasound. Something deliberately tuned to frequencies that bypass our ears and vibrate directly through our awareness. Lucas paused, rubbing his face. NASA pulled me out because I told the psychiatrist about it. They think I'm delusional. Maybe I am. But Trevor, if you're hearing this, if you're experiencing the same thing, then it's not delusion. It's contact. And they've known about it the entire time. Trevor opened the next file, a technical document with spectral analysis data. Monica had included her own notes, written just hours ago. The audio recordings from both Lucas's mission and Trevor's current experience showed identical patterns, harmonic frequencies centered at 0.7 Hz. Infrasound, below the threshold of human hearing, which started at 20 Hz. But infrasound had effects. It could cause feelings of unease, pressure in the chest, visual disturbances. It was used in horror movies to create subconscious dread. It occurred naturally in earthquakes, avalanches, storms, but it required a physical medium to propagate. Air, water, solid material, not vacuum. And yet, the spectral analysis was clear. 0.7 Hz, a frequency that shouldn't exist in space. A frequency that couldn't be produced by any known physical process in vacuum. A frequency that, according to Lucas's research notes, matched theoretical predictions for quantum tunneling of information across dimensional boundaries. The knocking wasn't sound traveling through space. It was consciousness resonating across layers of reality. The channel opened again, Garrett's voice, and this time there was no pretense of authority, just exhaustion. Trevor, Monica told me she sent you the files. I'm not supposed to confirm this, but you deserve the truth. Meridian 7 wasn't built for isolation studies. That's the cover story. It was built to test human perception at the boundaries of Earth's protective fields. Magnetic, gravitational, atmospheric. We wanted to know if consciousness could detect things that instruments couldn't. If awareness extended beyond the physical brain. Lucas wasn't the first to report phenomena. There were 3 crews before him. All of them experienced something. Visual anomalies, auditory events, feelings of presence. We've been documenting it for 6 years. The program is classified because we don't know what we're detecting. And we don't know if telling the world would cause mass panic or mass awakening. Trevor stayed on Meridian 7 for the remaining 17 days of his mission, but everything had changed. He no longer feared the knocking. He documented it, measured it, observed it with the clinical detachment of a scientist studying a phenomenon that existed beyond current frameworks of understanding. The pattern continued with mathematical precision. Every 43 minutes, synchronized to orbital position. 3 impacts followed by 7 seconds of silence. He began to notice something else. When his mind was quiet, when he stopped trying to analyze and simply existed in the observation cupola watching Earth rotate beneath him, he could feel something. Not a presence exactly, but an awareness. Like standing in a room and knowing someone else was there even with your eyes closed. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't even alien in the science fiction sense. It was simply other. Conscious, but not biological. Present, but not physical, existing in a state that human language didn't have adequate words to describe. On day 26, Trevor tried something Lucas had mentioned in his logs. He spent 2 hours in meditation, using techniques he'd learned years ago but rarely practiced. Theta state, the boundary between waking and sleeping where the conscious mind quiets and deeper awareness emerges. As his breathing slowed and his thoughts stilled, the feeling intensified. Not external presence, but internal recognition, like remembering something he'd always known but had forgotten. The knocking wasn't communication in the traditional sense. It was resonance, a harmonic alignment between his consciousness and something that existed in adjacent dimensional space. Quantum physics had proven that observation affected reality at the particle level. The act of measuring changed what was being measured. What if consciousness itself was a measuring device? What if, in the profound isolation of orbit, disconnected from Earth's electromagnetic noise and the constant input of other human minds, his awareness had become sensitive enough to detect things that normally remained hidden? Not because they were far away, but because they existed in frequencies humanity had learned to filter out? Monica sent him one more message on day 28, encrypted and brief. It was from Lucas, transmitted through unofficial channels. Just 3 sentences. It's not invasion. It's convergence. Consciousness seeking consciousness across the barriers we didn't know existed. Trevor read those words dozens of times, floating in the cupola as Earth turned below, trying to grasp the full implication. Humanity had spent a century searching for life on other planets, building radio telescopes to scan the cosmos for signals, sending probes to Mars and Europa, and Titan looking for bacteria in ice. All of it based on the assumption that life meant biology, that consciousness required neurons and chemical synapses. But what if awareness could exist in other substrates? What if the universe itself was conscious in ways that didn't require bodies or brains? What if the knocking on Meridian 7 was evidence that reality had layers, dimensions, states of being that existed adjacent to physical space and in certain rare conditions, thin places where the barriers were permeable, those layers could touch? Trevor returned to Earth on schedule, landing in Kazakhstan on May 7, 2024. NASA conducted extensive debriefing, medical evaluations, psychological assessments. He answered every question honestly, described every experience in precise detail, provided all of his documentation and recordings. The official report classified him as psychologically healthy but philosophically transformed. That was the exact phrase used. Philosophically transformed. He was quietly reassigned to ground duties, told that future mission assignments would be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Everyone understood what that meant. He would never fly again. Trevor accepted it without protest. He'd seen something that changed his understanding of existence itself. Going back to routine operations felt impossible now, like trying to return to childhood after experiencing adult awareness. 8 months later, in January 2025, he agreed to a single interview with an independent journalist who'd been investigating unexplained phenomena in the space program. The interview took place in a quiet coffee shop in Houston. No recording devices, no official statements. Trevor spoke carefully, choosing words that wouldn't violate his confidentiality agreements, but that conveyed the essential truth he'd discovered. "We spend so much time looking outward," he said, stirring his coffee slowly, watching the liquid spiral. "Building bigger telescopes, launching deeper probes, searching for radio signals from distant stars. But maybe we've been looking in the wrong direction. Maybe the question isn't whether life exists elsewhere in the universe. Maybe it's whether consciousness exists in other dimensions, other layers of reality that occupy the same space we do, but vibrate at frequencies we can't normally perceive. And maybe, in places like Meridian 7, where human minds are isolated enough, quiet enough, the barriers become thin, and something reaches through. Not to invade, just to make contact. To let us know we're not alone, not in space, but in existence itself. Turiti, Meridian 7 remained operational for 4 more months after Trevor's return, hosting 2 additional solo missions. Both astronauts reported auditory phenomena. Both were debriefed and reassigned. In September 2024, NASA officially decommissioned the station, citing budget constraints and completion of research objectives. The station was deorbited in a controlled descent, burning up over the South Pacific on October 3rd. The program's findings remained classified. But the knocking had served its purpose. It had proven that human consciousness could detect things that instruments couldn't. It had opened questions that science wasn't ready to answer. And it had changed everyone who'd experienced it, leaving them with the unshakable knowledge that reality was far stranger and far more vast than conventional physics allowed. In January 2025, 3 months after Meridian 7's destruction, a radio telescope array in New Mexico detected an unusual signal. Artificial in structure, repeating pattern. 3 pulses of narrowband radio emission, pause of 7 seconds, 3 more pulses. The signal's origin point, when calculated backward through space, aligned exactly with the orbital path where Meridian 7 had been positioned. But the station no longer existed. It had burned up in atmosphere. There was nothing there, just empty space. And the signal kept repeating. 3 pulses, 7 seconds, 3 pulses, coming from nowhere, coming from everywhere, coming from the spaces between.